I was born in Tofino, BC, the youngest of 3 kids. My sister is 10 years older than me, and my brother is 8 years older. We grew up really close to each other. My parents entrusted them with watching me a lot of the time at first, but after my brother was supposed to be watching me one day, and I fell off the counter onto my head, they learned better. They say that my nose was broken in the fall, but at least I don't remember. I do, however, remember a few years later when my brother accidentally shot me with his BB gun. The pillow I was leaning on was apparently ideal for a target. My family hopped around Vancouver Island for the first few years of my life. We always lived really close to the ocean. 2 of our homes were beach homes. I saw the sand and the stones and the waves in the water as part of me. It fed into my creative side, and it really guided my creations. I would wander up the beaches in sun and rain, and soak up all I could from nature. Though we moved around a lot, the ocean was always where we went, so it was my constant friend. One of my favorite places was close by the river delta that led into the ocean. Here, balanced over one of the smaller branches of the river, were several fallen logs. I'm not good with estimates, but at its lowest point, at its narrowest point, it was about the length of our classroom, maybe slightly more. Anyways, here, this group of fallen trees were all balancing against one another, and it created a bridge over the swirling water. And above there was a canopy of trees all bent over, and they created this serene green tunnel. It was here that I spent hours and hours. And it was here one day that I heard a loud crack and looked up just in time to see one of the old dead trees break free of its roots and fall down, clonking me out cold and knocking me into the water. I woke up at the edge of the water, lodged in the nook of a branch that was sticking out from God knows where. It's strange looking back, because even with that experience, I still have never learned how to swim. My greatest companion during these years was my pug Eddie. I'd always loved pugs. My favorite movie since I was 5 was Milo and Otis, and every time I watched it, I would apparently end up crying. I cried and said how much I wanted a pug, and eventually my mom helped me see that I could do things to earn money and save up for a pug. It would be a long process, but I was motivated. I pet sit for people, and I did yard work and other various jobs. My parents contributed some money from my birthday and from Christmas into the fund as well. As it was, it took just over a year to save enough, and then my parents arranged for us to visit a breeder that was several hours away. He was the runt of the litter, and as soon as I picked him up, he scrambled up to put his front paws over my shoulder, and he burrowed his snout right into my hair. I packed him back to our car like that. And as the years went on, and even in his old age, that was his favorite place to be, backed around like a chubby, furry baby with his arms over his shoulder. When I reached my high school years, I chose the opportunity to go to a private school. We had just moved to Vancouver, and I was aware that even though I was surrounded by more people, it might actually be more difficult to meet people and become familiar with the area. It was in high school where I met my best friend, who is the one person who I still have remained close with in all the years since. It was in high school, on my sweet 16th birthday, that we all watched the news in shock as the Twin Towers in New York fell. It was also in high school that I found my first role model, my social studies teacher. I believe what made him such a strong role model was the fact that he went beyond the realm of what he was required to teach us and taught us many life lessons. And of course, those are the ones that stick with you. He had this desire to see us all thrive in our lives. So for 4 years, I had the privilege of having him as a teacher. And in my grade 12 year, a month away from graduation, he died of a heart attack. The whole school was broken. He had been the one person who seemed to hold the school together. I remember crying randomly for weeks after. I remember my friends and I huddling together during the funeral, and my eyes were dry, and I did not understand why. I remember telling my friends that if I ever had a son, I'd be using the teacher's middle name, Clifford, as part of my son's name. It was in high school, right after he died, that I started running. I had previously realized that exercising helped me feel better when I was feeling depressed. I fell in love with it. I could run and run for ages, and I started setting time aside regularly to go run in nature and just encounter the high that came with it. Soon after, I discovered some individuals who were doing parkour, and so I began to train in that as well. And this was better than just running, since I could push my strengths and push my training to new levels. It kept my mind focused, it kept my mind busy, yet free at the same time. I continued to practice this for the following 3 years, and I believe it saved my life. But before I get to that, I entered university in the science degree program at UBC, but I was still really unsure of what direction to take, and like any unmotivated freshman, I ended up squandering my time and began hanging out with other unmotivated individuals, all the while growing more unsatisfied with where I was and what I was doing. Eventually I ended up leaving university to go live in India for several months. I had been offered a volunteer position at a school in the province of Gujarat. The position was for helping young children learn English and art. I stayed in India for almost 4 months, essentially abandoning my university education without any thought of consequences. The city I was in was like this massive parkour playground. It was glorious. There were fences and trees and buildings all squished in together with their flat roofs, great for running. I had an acquaintance in parkour who had ended up coming to stay nearby me for part of my time in India. He'd been touring around the country at the same time as I went, so this was a happy coincidence. During my free time when I wasn't teaching, we explored and we ran. There was a gang of monkeys that were always hopping around the city, and we joked about how we needed to run after them and how we should go climbing in after them, but in the end we were far too wary in case the monkeys got cranky at us. This brings me back to where I said before, when I said parkour saved my life, I believe. My acquaintance and I had been exploring down the streets in the older part of the city that day. And of course, like many times before, we were basically just getting lost. The streets that we were in were quite compact, and they were dark, even though there was the afternoon sun blazing down on the city. Because it was so compact, it made the streets dark. Anyways, we eventually realized that the same guys had been following us for some time, and we started to keep an eye on them as we continued on our way. But whichever street or alleyway we were turning into, we were still being followed, and the group was getting closer to us. I'm not sure what ended up happening to our attackers in the long run. When they got close enough, we were ready. I jumped, I grabbed the back of somebody's head, and I punched him straight on. My friend also acted in defense, and then we bolted. It feels really good to break a nose in a situation like that. I didn't want to run, I wanted to break more. But we ran. We weren't chased for long, but we made full use of all we had learned so far from our parkour training. We ran, we jumped, we climbed up the side of this one building to try and figure out where we were, how to get back on the main street. And we didn't stop running until we were out. After I finally returned to Vancouver, I began a new degree in psychology, and I had a lot of energy, I had a lot of drive. Everything was going smoothly, for one term at least. Then Eddie died. We knew it was coming. He was very old, he was growing weaker, and one day he just stopped eating. We could see he was suffering a lot, and to keep the long story short, my vet advised that we put him to sleep. I couldn't take him. My mom was the one who ended up going with him for this. I couldn't make myself to be the one to go with him. I couldn't face it. Here I was, I'd gone through the death of my role model, my grandmother, and several others in my life. And if I had the opportunity to do so, I would choose to be with any of them during the death process. But for some reason, I could not be there when Eddie went through it. And if I had the chance again, I still don't think that I could be there.
If you can fly, I'm glad the earth doesn't care. If I go up there, if you want to, just ask me and I'll take you along.
The cycle of life and death can have really funny timing. Eddie died in August, and only a month later I had the fun experience of getting pregnant. Then there was the less fun experience a few months later of giving birth to my son. My son, who I named Felix Clifford. And then I had the even less fun experience of getting back into university as a single parent with a 6-month-old infant. But by this point, I was determined to continue my educational passion now that I'd finally found it. By this time, I was living on my own as a single parent, and I was also working full-time within a year of Felix's birth. And this is where I find myself 5 years later, with the end of the degree just a few weeks away. And life is beautiful.